Many of you already know that one of my spiritual practices is ballet. It's a practice that I've taken up as an adult. I took my first ballet class when I was 15, but didn't start attending regularly until I was 21. Now I'm almost 9 years into taking classes at least once a week. It's one of the best things that I do to keep myself grounded and sane. And it's where I practice failure. When I first started taking classes, I was very self-conscious. I really like to be good at things, and ballet is just not something that you can be good at right away. In fact, it is a thing that very few people actually get to the point of being really good at, and 99% of those people started dancing when they were 3 years old. And I'm not one of those people. And so I felt embarrassed every time that I fell out of balance or forgot the steps or had to awkwardly run out of the way at the end of a combination. And here's the thing. I have indeed gotten better at ballet over the past 9 years, but I think even more than that, I've gotten better at failure. I still have plenty of moments when I fall out of balance or forget the steps or substitute some horribly awkward movement for whatever it was I was supposed to be doing in that moment. And I usually do all three at once in any given class. But I don't beat myself up about it anymore. I don't hide in the back of the class hoping that no one notices when I mess up. Instead, I use that hour and a half a week as a time to embrace the fact that I can screw up in that place with very few consequences. It's a place where I can practice trying and failing, and trying again, and failing again, and so on. It's important that we have these spaces in our lives, the spaces where the potential consequences of failure are insignificant. It's important to have that space where we can fall flat on our face and be okay with it. It's important to practice failure because it allows us to feel more comfortable taking risks. Now, I know some of you might be thinking by now, why does she keep using that F word? Failure is bad, right? Can't we use some more innocuous word like mistake? And we certainly could, but I don't think it has the same sort of power. We resist claiming and using failure. We want to be good at things right away. And it's okay if we make little mistakes, right? But failure, that's serious business. Which is why I think it's important to talk about it. I know that I approach failure as something to be avoided at all costs. It is pretty high up there on my list of fears. And I also know that when I can let go of that fear, I approach life in a completely different way. It allows me to take risks, bigger risks than I otherwise would have been willing to take. So today, I don't want to talk about mistakes. I want to talk about failure. I want us to think about those times in our lives when we tried something new, or we set a big goal, or reached for something we weren't quite sure we could accomplish. And it didn't turn out well, at least not the first time around. And I want us to think about the ways that we learned and grew from those moments. My experience, my 30 years of experience with Unitarian Universalists, tells me that we are generally cautious people. We have often been accused of being too much chalk and too little action. We have this strong desire to know for sure that something is going to work before we jump into it. And like me, we don't like being wrong. And I'm as guilty of all of this as anyone. My default mode of being is to play it safe, to not reach too high, and to not get my hopes up, lest they be disappointed. When I was a kid, I was painfully shy. One of the things that was hardest for me was calling up friends to invite them to do something. My parents, in the interest of helping me grow, decided at some point that this was something I needed to learn how to do. And it felt scary every time. There were many times that I would choose to read a book or play outside alone instead of picking up the phone because I was so scared that my friend would say no to my invitation. I was so scared that I would fail. To this day, I feel that little 7-year-old fear within me every time I pick up the phone to invite a friend to go for a walk or play board games. I do it anyway, but I feel that twinge. Now, the rational part of me says that this is ridiculous, but my heart says that it actually makes sense, because relationship is actually all about risk, isn't it? To reach out to one another, to enter into community, means putting yourself out there, putting yourself on the line. And it means being vulnerable, which is something we all hate, right? The late Reverend Forrest Church wrote extensively about the way in which love and vulnerability are intimately connected. He wrote, "Whenever we give our hearts in love, the burden of our vulnerability grows. We risk being rebuffed or embarrassed or inadequate. Beyond these things, we risk the enormous pain of loss. When those we love die, a part of us dies with them. When those we love are sick in body or spirit, we too feel the pain. Indeed, whenever we risk entering into relationship, we risk enormous pain, disappointment, and loss. We know that at some point, that relationship will be inadequate. At some point, that relationship will take work. And at some point, no matter what, that relationship will end. There is no relationship that does not come also with vulnerability and loss. And yet, most of us take the risk of entering into relationship again and again and again. Because, as Church writes, all of this is worth it, especially the pain. If we insulate our hearts from suffering, we shall only subdue the very thing that makes life worth living. We cannot protect ourselves from loss. We can only protect ourselves from the death of love. We are left only with the aching hollow of regret, that haunting emptiness where love might have been. We can only protect ourselves from regret, he says. In many ways, our fear of failure in general is all tied up with this riskiness of relationship. While not everything that we reach for is explicitly about our relationships, nearly everything is relational in some way. If we're trying to get a job or launch a new venture, it's all tied up with whether people want to enter into a business relationship with us. If here at UU Nashua we are experimenting with how we do worship or starting a new program, it's all about how that builds up or breaks down the relationships within our congregation. Because being in relationship and being in community inevitably involves risk, it also inevitably involves failure. We almost never get it right the first time. And in fact, if we do get it right the first time, we probably aren't reaching high enough. When I go to ballet class and I nail it, it's usually because I went to a class that was too easy. The children's version of our third Unitarian Universalist principle says that we believe that we should accept one another and keep on learning together. This principle comes straight out of our Unitarian heritage, a heritage that values personal growth and the belief that we can always keep learning and growing. When I think about how we can best live this out in our congregations and in our lives, it seems like we might say that not only do we keep on learning together, but we also keep on failing together. Because failure and learning go hand in hand. Now, hopefully we aren't failing in the same way every time. You don't want to do that. But hopefully we are encouraging one another to take those risks and accepting one another even when those risks don't pan out as planned. Even in our covenant of right relationship, which we read together earlier in the service, we leave that room for failure because we know that it's the only way that we can learn. We say, when I fall out of covenant, not if I fall out of covenant, but when. We know it's inevitable. The writers of our covenant were wise enough to understand that a covenant's purpose is to set those high aspirations, not with the assumption that we will always live into them, but with the knowledge that we can never learn to live into right relationship with one another unless we are striving for something really big and growing from the times that we fall short. So the next time you hear someone say, "We tried that once and it didn't work," I hope you will at least consider, does that really mean it won't work again? Maybe you don't try it exactly the same way. Maybe you consider what it was that didn't work the first time and try to improve upon it. But consider this as well. How much would we have really accomplished in this world if we didn't try for a second or third or 20th or 33rd time like that ant? One of the things I've been hearing from a lot of progressive activists over the past few months is that we who believe in justice and respect for human dignity need to get ready to fail a lot and fail big over the next few years. This past week, we experienced this firsthand here in New Hampshire. On Thursday, our New Hampshire House of Representatives voted to table a bill that would have prohibited discrimination against transgender people in housing, employment, and public places. Folks from across the state and both major political parties had poured time, energy, and love into working to get this bill passed. And a broad coalition of folks showed up at the State House on Thursday in support of the bill. And it was simply set aside. The dignity of trans people in New Hampshire was tabled this week by our representatives. I am sure that this came as a huge disappointment to all those who had worked so hard, only to have their efforts swept aside. And I know that this is not the end of the fight to protect trans rights in our state. This bill will come around again and again and again until we hit the right moment and the right momentum to get it through. If we are going to have to get ready to fail, and fail big, we need to start by learning how to fail in small ways. I don't go to ballet every week to learn how to fail at ballet. I go to practice failing and trying again in a place where the stakes are low, so that I'm ready to do the same thing when there are bigger things at stake. Anne Lamont offers this wisdom for embracing failure. She says, "Here's how to break through the perfectionism and become a person of life-giving risk. Make a lot of mistakes. Fall on your butt more often. Celebrate messes. These are where the goods are. Put something on the calendar that you know you'll be terrible at, like dance lessons or a meditation retreat or boot camp. Find a writing partner who will help you with your work by reading it for you and telling you the truth about it with respect, to help you make it better and better, and for whom you will do the same thing. Find someone else who wants to steal his or her life back too, now, today. Now, today. May we begin to make space for practicing failure in our lives. May we all keep learning together and accepting one another when things don't pan out the way we expected it to. May we become a people here together of life-giving risk. May it be so.